Hello everybody, I'm Rene Ramos, director of the Lynn and Louis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives, and this is Rewind, the show that looks back on Florida's past with historic film and video. It's time for another trip back into the past, so sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of Rewind.
We pledge to inform with candor and fairness, to entertain with dignity and good taste, to serve with vigor the needs and the welfare of the people of South Florida and our country, and above all, to conduct ourselves as befits an invited guest in the homes of our viewers.
Good afternoon. I'm Gordon Shaw, and here is the news. A new television service to South Florida viewers was begun at noon today. At that hour, WCKT began permanent programming.
Good evening, I'm Wayne Ferris, and you have just witnessed a scene from the past, the birth of a television station. 10 years ago yesterday, on July 29, 1956, WCKT was born to a pledge of public service.
Tonight, our 10 years, a special birthday appraisal of WCKT's decade of service to the community through television.
When Channel 7 signed on 10 years ago, it was a major community event. It signaled a new era of television in South Florida, a sign that the area was growing up. But a TV station is not just a business venture. It's a commitment to ideals, quality standards, and responsibilities. It's significant that the first program broadcast from this studio was a news program. For news is the community's vital grapevine by which its citizens communicate their needs, their problems, their triumphs, and tragedies. In a moment, our 10 years of progress. WCKT television is uniquely located to open a window on South Florida. It was built with room to grow and with a twofold purpose: responsibility and responsive service to community needs. A television station is something new, a child of the space age. An island was developed beside the 79th Street Causeway for the purpose of building a broadcasting facility to be proud of, one that would provide the modern capacity for service demanded. WCKT is all television station, the first in Florida to be built from the ground up. We also like to think it's the most beautiful. A unique expression of the subtropical character of our viewing area set in the middle of Biscayne Bay. This modern studio facility was the beginning of many firsts. In July 1962, WCKT established the first remote facility in neighboring Fort Lauderdale to better serve Broward County, that growing segment of our viewing area. In August 1963, my 6 o'clock report became the first local news program to expand to a full half hour. WCKT pioneered the use of electronic computers for election returns and initiated new techniques of election analysis, including the use of political analysts. And on December 27, 1965, WCKT became the first Miami station to telecast in live color, making us first with full color capability, including network, film, and videotape facilities. But it takes more than technical achievement to live up to the creed that stresses a vigorous public service. And if proof is measured in recognition, then the evidence is WCKT's many awards and honors, including 31 major national awards presented to WCKT during the last decade for achievements in news, documentary, and public affairs programming. In August 1957, Channel 7 produced its first news film documentary, The Whispered Menace. It was a bold adventure for a station only a year old, for it dealt with the dark world of homosexuality and the sexual psychopath. But this first television exposure of the problem was designed to shed light on a taboo subject. The Whispered Menace hit its mark and won important national recognition, a Radio and Television News Director Association News Award. The Whispered Menace also set the pattern for future Channel 7 documentary programs, factual, frank, uncompromising appraisals of South Florida's most critical problems. In 1960, WCKT won the coveted George Foster Peabody Award for responsive leadership in public service in the prompt analysis and exposure of problems incident to the Cuban crisis. We remain the only Florida media to win a Peabody. In 1961, the Atlanta chapter of Sigma Delta Chi presented WCKT with its regional Green Eyeshade Award for outstanding achievement in reporting for exposure of Miami slum conditions. WCKT also holds 2 George Washington Honor Medals. They were awarded by the Freedoms Foundation at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania in 1961 and again in 1963 for outstanding achievement in bringing about a better understanding of the American way of life. For 3 consecutive years, 1964, 65, and 66, the National Conference of Christians and Jews has honored WCKT with its Mass Media Award. On each occasion, WCKT was cited for outstanding contribution to better human relations and the cause of brotherhood. Channel 7 also holds a record, 4 consecutive Vigilant Patriot Awards. Every year since 1962, the All-American Conference to Combat Communism in Washington has commended WCKT's outstanding contribution to public awareness and understanding of the communist menace. And in 1966, Channel 7 became the first winner of a major new journalism award, a $1,000 prize from the Scripps Howard Foundation for the best news-related interview on an American TV station. Recognition, of course, does not come to those who pursue the routine. In 1959, when the school integration crisis exploded in Little Rock, Arkansas, Channel 7 newsman Ben Silver was there. Central High School may have been off our regular news beat, but WCKT understood the significance of what was happening there and what might happen here if the full impact of Little Rock escaped the people of Miami. Covering hurricanes is difficult and dangerous, but routine for Channel 7 newsmen who have flown into the eye of many a deadly storm with Navy hurricane hunters. It's even more treacherous on the ground. But we've never lost a man yet, although our reporters stay with the storm for as long as Florida is threatened. Tracking hurricanes also means keeping the public fully informed. As the storm approaches, WCKT preempts its regular programming schedule to become a community clearinghouse for weather, evacuation, and storm safety information. I'm Wayne Ferris, and I'm standing just outside the Golden Triangle, the heart of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In 1960, I traveled to 3 northern cities, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and New York, to find out what tourists thought of South Florida. The result was an hour-long critique of our tourist industry entitled The Yankee Dollar. In 1961, we traveled to Philadelphia, where Channel 7 newsman Wilson Griffith filmed that city's progress in slum clearance. In this way, a valuable dimension was added to a documentary series on local slum problems entitled Miami Condemned, a series that won the Green Eyeshade Award. In 1962, we tackled South Florida's transportation problem. I rode the monorail in Dallas while other Channel 7 newsmen explored rapid transit developments in Houston, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Toronto, Canada. The result was a documentary, Come Ride With Me. Our newsmen have covered some of the major news stories of recent times, like the Yarmouth Castle ship fire that took 89 lives off the Bahamas in November 1965. There have also been more pleasant reporting trips, like the opening of the Florida Pavilion at the New York World's Fair, but always with an eye toward those events that directly relate to South Florida. But even this was not a simple sightseeing excursion, as civil rights pickets jammed the Florida exhibit. Police were called to disperse the demonstrators, and a cold rain added to the last dismal touch.
This is Ira Eisenberg at the World's Fair, reporting for WCKT and wishing I was home.
WCKT's service goes beyond its borders. Our newsmen have visited 5 continents and dozens of foreign countries to make the world more understandable to our viewers. Cuba, under the jackboot of Valencio Batista, was our first foreign assignment. Channel 7 newsman Pat Fairley filmed these scenes of Castro rebels. Meanwhile, newsman Ben Silver was held by Batista police for 7 days during another attempt to make contact with the revolutionaries. Castro triumphed in 1959, and the WCKT news team was in Havana when he arrived. They remained to film the circus-like trials of real and suspected Batista henchmen. Channel 7 News Director Gene Strahl interviewed Castro at 3 a.m. in a Havana TV studio. Last year, newsman Ben Silver crossed the Florida Straits in a small boat to film the beginning of a new Cuban exodus, part of a continuing story. Events frequently have taken us to the Dominican Republic, from the bloody end of dictator Rafael Trujillo to the present turmoil. As far back as 6 years ago, we were covering political unrest in remote places like British Guiana. Channel 7 newsmen consider the Caribbean their special territory, from nearby Nassau to distant Trinidad. They know the area well, and most important, they know its people and its problems. Other WCKT reporting assignments have taken our newsmen to places as different and distant from Miami as North Africa, Italy, England, and France. But our most extensive visit abroad occurred in 1959, a 10,000-mile tour of the Soviet Union. That story in a moment. My Iron Curtain Odyssey began in Moscow, where I interviewed Russian citizens in the shadow of the Kremlin. Florida's Governor Leroy Collins led a group of 9 colleagues on a 3-week tour of 7 Soviet cities. Newsman Ben Silver and I were the only TV journalists to accompany them on what proved to be an extraordinary inside view of the communist motherland. It was an exhausting whirlwind tour that took us from the sunny Black Sea resorts to primitive Samarkand and Alma-Ata, a village on the tense Russia-China border. But we saw things few Westerners had seen before. Of course, we were in the hands of Red officials all the way, and it was their intention that we not see everything. We were treated like honored guests, but watched closely wherever we went. In Dubna, we were allowed to film what was described to us as the largest cyclotron in the world, but the Russians wouldn't let us photograph the outside of the building because the walls had cracked. We found the Soviet Union a grim place for all its technological achievements, but came away impressed with the progress the Russians had made in converting their vast feudal nation into a modern industrial giant. The cordon of tourist guides and other officials that constantly surrounded our party kept the Soviet man in the street at arm's length. But this did not scare off the black marketeers who offered to buy everything we owned. The high point of our trip was an audience with Nikita Khrushchev. The burly, boisterous premier was in an expansive mood. It was a moment reporters dream about. Khrushchev made the usual boasts about the superiority of communism as he shook hands with each of us, including myself and WCKT's Ben Silver. Upon our return to Florida, Governor Collins helped narrate an hour-long documentary of our Russian tour entitled The Red Star. Governor Collins made these closing remarks.
As well as informative. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time out from your busy schedule to come in and talk with our Channel 7 viewers and give the people of South Dade a report on that trip.
Thank you, Wayne, and you honor me by inviting me here, and I hope that I have a moment to express our great appreciation for your presence with us on that trip and that of Ben Silver. You all added greatly to it, and this station is to be commended for the high quality of interest in public service which caused the decision to be made to have you go along with us, and it was a great privilege for us to have you.
The Red Star was the first in a long series of documentaries and special reports exposing the aims and methods of communism, both at home and throughout the hemisphere. In 1960, WCKT produced a series of 22 reports on the activities of Reds in the Miami area. As a result, the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee held a hearing in Miami, and several individuals named by WCKT defected to Cuba. Congressman Francis Walter, chairman of the House Committee on Un-American Activities, had this comment on WCKT's efforts.
A very significant contribution, and I want to congratulate you on the efforts that you put forth to bring to the people an awareness of this menace. It's a tragic thing that the American people don't realize that, after all, we are the object of the communist drive for world domination, and it's only through the efforts of people like yourselves that there has come to the people an appreciation of what this real menace really is, and I congratulate you sincerely.
Thank you. WCKT has also exposed the dangers of racism and the radical right. Documentaries have explored the conspiracy theories of John Stormer, Billy James Hargis, and other missionaries of reaction. WCKT has examined Let Freedom Ring, a Florida-based group specializing in anonymous, pre-recorded right-wing telephone attacks heard nationwide. Our reports were followed by a telephone company decision to reveal the sources of the vicious messages. The Ku Klux Klan reinvaded South Florida on a summer night in 1965. Robert Shelton, Imperial Wizard of the United Klans of America, presided. Klan organizer Charles Riddlehoover was later arrested in Miami after a series of WCKT documentaries. In an exclusive interview with newsman Ben Silver, it helped convict Riddlehoover of an illegal weapons charge. After an abortive hate campaign against WCKT, the disorganized night riders retreated. WCKT's anti-slum crusade began in 1960 and is still going strong. Our initial Miami Condemned series supported urban renewal. More recent programs have urged more concern for the housing needs of the poor and an end to the cynical practice of not enforcing safety and housing standards both in and out of the urban renewal area. In February of this year, a slum area rooming house burned, killing 7 children and 3 adults. A special documentary, Fire in the Ashes, exposed a pattern of bad laws and official neglect and led to passage of a strict new city fire code. City Commissioner Atherley Range responded.
I happened to have seen the production by Channel 7 last night, and I want to take a moment here to commend Channel 7 for the very thorough coverage of this catastrophe we had. And I would certainly like to know that an investigation is going to be made, and at this time I may offer a resolution. I would like to do that.
Sure may, Mrs. Raines.
Another documentary, Hall of Shame, exposed the problems of homosexuality and general overcrowding at Youth Hall, the county's juvenile detention facility. A grand jury investigation and action to build a new youth hall followed. WCKT newsmen have also investigated and exposed secrecy in state and local government. A documentary series, The Right to Know, explored the controversial question of pre-trial news coverage versus the rights of the accused. Earlier this year, WCKT explored the nightmare world of drug addiction. A pair of heroin addicts gave first-person accounts of how dope consumed their lives and drove them to theft and prostitution to support their habits. WCKT also exposed the underworld of marijuana and LSD and the activities of a strange religious cult called the Neo-American Church. Their leader was subsequently indicted for violating federal drug laws. These and many other documentary, educational, and cultural programs are presented on a regular basis, significant of WCKT's determination to support journalism excellence and high-performance standards. WCKT's award-winning Outlook series is the first and only weekly news film documentary production in South Florida. During the past 3.5 years, the Channel 7 News Department has produced 150 Outlook programs on subjects as diverse as Little League Baseball and the St. Augustine race riots. Another award winner, Florida Forum, has presented important national and international figures on the most critical issues of our times. Also, a regular weekly program, Florida Forum is working on its 165th production. Vice President Hubert Humphrey and others have been featured on Channel 7's Face-to-Face series. My interview with Dr. Martin Luther King was honored as the best television interview of this year by the Scripps Howard Foundation. WCKT's Summation series dramatizes actual court cases, with local members of the bar acting as judge and opposing legal counsel. Summation has been honored 3 years in succession by the Florida Bar Association with its top award for promoting better public understanding of the American legal system. Showcase is a series of cultural programs designed to give local amateur and semi-professional performers a chance to be seen and heard. And Proof Positive is a documentary series that explains the activities of the many health, welfare, and character-building agencies in the community and how they serve the public. We've interviewed such world figures as Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev and Deputy Premier Dmitry Polyansky, former Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista, and the present strongman of that troubled island, Fidel Castro, Francois Duvalier, the tyrannical ruler of primitive Haiti, the late Rafael Trujillo, 30-year ruler of the Dominican Republic, and Juan Bosch, the poet whose regime survived less than a year, Ellsworth Bunker, key U.S. negotiator throughout the Dominican crisis, Hector Garcia Godoy, the interim president who wanted free election, and Dr. Joaquin Balaguer, the new president of the Dominican Republic. Chetty Jagan, the former Marxist premier of British Guiana, and his arch opponent and current premier, Forbes Burnham, and President Arturo Elia of Argentina, who was recently overthrown. Important national personalities include former Presidents Herbert Hoover and Harry Truman, both frequent visitors to South Florida, Vice President Richard Nixon, and his successor, Hubert Humphrey, Sergeant Shriver, founder of the Peace Corps, General Maxwell Taylor, former U.S. Ambassador to Vietnam, Dr. Edward Teller, father of the H-bomb, Republican Vice Presidential candidate William Miller, New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller, and Michigan Governor George Romney, Melvin Belli, the San Francisco lawyer who defended Jack Ruby, and Percy Foreman, who defended Candace Mossler and Melvin Lane Powers, Alabama Klan leader Robert Shelton, and Corps leader James Farmer, Alabama Governor George Wallace, and Julian Bond, the Negro whose election was voided by the Georgia legislature, right-wing evangelist Billy James Hargis, and the Reverend Martin Luther King, and of course many, many more. Some final notes on our 10 years after this message. The past half hour tells only a portion of the story of WCKT's 10 years. We cannot squeeze into a half hour all of WCKT's thousands of hours of TV fare, nor can we mention all of the people who make the Channel 7 operation what it is. But I can introduce a man who makes it possible, the president of Sunbeam Television Corporation, Mr. Sidney Anson.
We at WCKT made a commitment to service with responsibility the needs and desires of the South Florida community by communicating the activities of the community through information, news, and entertainment programs. WCKT has mirrored the character of its locale, ever cognizant that as a television medium, this station serves a community larger than the city in which our studios are located. I am satisfied, through public response, that WCKT is as much an audible force as it is a visible presence in South Florida. The station's many awards and signal honors are testimony to its many and varied achievements. Such overwhelming recognition is gratifying, of course, but WCKT's greatest satisfaction continues to come from the vast local audiences for whom our programs are created and our efforts directed. This is the truest measure of the value of what we do, and it is our greatest pleasure and reward. As we begin our 11th year, WCKT has found its place in the sun.
Victor Hugo once said, "Would you realize what revolution is, call it progress. And would you realize what progress is, call it tomorrow." Television is the symbol of the progressive revolution of communication. This is Wayne Ferris. Good night.
You have been watching our 10 years, a history of WCKT's decade of service. Next Saturday at 6:30, Outlook will return with another report of interest to the South Florida community. This program was pre-recorded. WCKT invites your comments.
That's about it for this edition of Rewind. Just time to remind you that Rewind features historical film and video from the Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives. To see more from the Wolfson Archives collections, visit our website, wolfsonarchives.org. You can search the archives catalog and watch video online. And be sure to connect to our YouTube channel, where you will find hundreds of carefully curated clips, or link to the Wolfson Archives Facebook page to keep up with our busy calendar of historical happenings. Until next time, I'm Rene Ramos. Thanks for watching.